Howdy, everybody. Dr. Andy Woods here, pastor, teacher here at Sugarland Bible Church. I want to welcome you to Pastor's Point of View number 392. This is being released January the 23rd, 2026. Continue to move into the new year, and prophecy continues to find I don't want to say fulfillment, but certainly stage setting, all around us. And so to help us with that, we have a prophecy update for you today. If you look at our previous slide, here are the three areas that we want to go over. I want to bring you up to speed on globalism, number one. Number two, there's been some key developments in the Eurocentric New World Order. And then finally, we'll bring you up to speed on even more developments related to Babylon. Let's jump right in and tackle our first bullet point, and this is globalism. As a biblical jumping off point, we like to use the book of Daniel, chapter 7 and verse 23, which really is a prophecy given in the 6th century BC to Daniel under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit concerning the type of government that will exist on planet Earth before Jesus returns in his second advent. And in the process, it gives us one of the clearest passages of coming one world government that we have anywhere in the Bible. So that's why we reference it so frequently. But Daniel writes, the fourth beast will be a fourth kingdom on the earth, which will be different from all the other kingdoms, and will devour the whole earth and tread it down and crush it. So you'll notice that this government of the Antichrist that's coming will subdue the whole earth, and it will be tyrannical in nature. It will devour the entire earth, and it will tread it down and crush it. And there have been some amazing developments in globalism and our progress into the New World Order as the governments of the earth are, to a large extent, reacting to what our own president, a nationalistic Donald Trump, is doing. So Donald Trump has made some amazing moves. And one of the moves he's made is he's pushed America, as he promised to do, make America great again, into more of a nationalistic paradigm, a nationalistic framework, make decisions that are good for the United States rather than the globe, in which I, as a constitutionalist and an American patriot, applaud. But as these decisions are being made, one of the things that's very interesting to point out, one of the very interesting things to note is the reaction of the globe against him. And as the world reacts against him, it's actually preparatory for the type of globalism that we see predicted in Daniel 7, verse 23, because we know that Donald Trump, as wonderful as a president as he is not going to be in that position forever. So what are some of the things that Donald Trump has done that the world is reacting against? Notice this first article. This one comes from the Jewish, I believe it's called News Syndicate, JNS.org. This is a January 8th article, 2026. The title of it is Trump Announces, and this is big, a United States exit from dozens of UN international groups. I mean, this is something that he's doing here that the Biden administration would never do. In fact, they went the opposite direction. The Obama administration went the opposite direction. The Clinton administration went the opposite direction. And even Republican presidents, whether it's Bush, etc., would never do something like this. In fact, if John McCain had become president or Mitt Romney had become president, they would have never done anything like this anti-globalism that the world is reacting against. But notice what Trump did here. And again, this is stunning. It says U.S. President Donald Trump announced plans to withdraw Washington from 66 United Nations and international organization agencies, commissions, and conventions. Trump signed and published a presidential memorandum on Wednesday in which he said, followed a review of which organizations, conventions, and treaties are contrary to the interests of the United States. The withdrawals will come with full U.S. funding cuts for certain of these international entities. The Trump administration has found these institutions to be redundant in their scope, mismanaged, unnecessary, wasteful, poorly run, captured by the interests of actors advancing their own agendas contrary to our own, or a threat to our nation's national sovereignty, freedoms, and general prosperity, stated Marco Rubio, the United States Secretary of State. Washington will exit, listen to this, this is huge, will exit the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, which serves as a central international agreement on climate crisis solutions, along with the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and other assorted environmental organizations. Interrupting just for a minute, keep in mind that it was George H.W. Bush, the first Bush, that got us locked into that framework as a Republican president, but surprise, he was also a globalist. So all of these meetings that we go to where, we've got to meet to curtail our capitalism to save planet Earth, starting with the Rio de Janeiro conference back in 1992 with Maurice Strong and others, and how we've been locked into that framework ever since, being always pulled in that direction, sometimes overtly, sometimes subtly. I mean, you can thank George H.W. Bush for that. And it's Donald Trump that's pulling us out of it miraculously and unbelievably. The article goes on, it says that Trump announced last year that the United States would exit the Paris climate deal as well. The memo on Wednesday also calls for withdrawals from the UN Population Fund, which focuses on maternal and child health, and the UN offices of the Special Representative of the Secretary General for Children in Armed Conflict and Sexual Violence in Conflict. The Children in Armed Conflict office has accused Israel. See, these international groups are so anti-Israel, anti-U.S. sovereignty. These are just crises, some of them hyped, some of them exaggerated, some of them manufactured to get the United States to surrender our prosperity and sovereignty to some global body that promises to solve the crisis for us if we simply acquiesce our sovereignty to these international bodies. And by the way, these groups are highly selective in how they operate. China, is one of the worst polluters out there. But China is sort of treated with kid gloves, shall we say, as compared to the draconian regulations that they want to put on the United States of America. I mean, all of these treaties and international agreements and so forth have one goal, to cut America down to size, to make it more palatable in the family of nations or the New World Order. And amazingly, by the providence of God, we have a president that's saying no to these things, something that Democrats and Republicans alike, would never do. But he goes on and he says, this author, the Children in the Armed Conflict Office has accused Israel for 2 years in a row of being a mass violator of children's rights, despite wildly inconsistent internet UN data and standards. Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General, warned Israel it was in danger of appearing on this year's sexual violence in conflict blacklist as well. Since the start of the second term in January last year, Trump has withdrawn the United States from other UN bodies, including the World Health Organization, that, by the way, Biden jammed us into, the UN Human Rights Council, and has called for dismantling UNRWA, UNRWA. I think that's pronounced as an abbreviation, UNRWA, the UN Agency for Palestinians, which Washington, Jerusalem, and others have said has extensive ties to Palestinian terror organizations. I mean, why in the world would America come under the authority of these organizations that have values that are hostile to those of the West? According to Trump's memo, the United States intends to exit other entities as well, such as the Carbon Free Energy Compact, the United Nations University, the International Tropical Timber Organization, the Pan American Institute for Geography and History, and the International Lead and Zinc Study Group. Here we have a quote from the executive director of UN Watch, who told JNS that UN Women, for example, failed to take meaningful action against Deputy Chief Sarah Douglas, who endorsed more than 150 anti-Israel social media posts that violated UN Code of Conduct. Quoting this person, the absence of accountability, compounded by electing regimes like Saudi Arabia to lead its Women's Rights Commission last year, reinforces why reform or recalibration of U.S. engagement is necessary. Quoting someone else who is a professor at George Mason University Scalia School of Law, so this guy's obviously a conservative, and executive director of its Middle East and International Law Center, stated that, quote, others like the Vienna Commission seek to manufacture, lay down astrofeed international body soft law that overwhelmingly aligns with progressive values. UN Women neglected mass rape by Hamas, but remembered Amal Clooney's birthday. To this person, this law professor, and I'm not giving their name because I'm going to have a hard time pronouncing it, but you can download this article and find out that detail for yourself. It says the biggest thing was the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. It was joined via Senate ratification treaty, making, listen to this, re-entry by a subsequent president almost impossible. Otherwise known as the UNFCCC, violated federal law by admitting the PA, Palestinian Authority, as a state, and will now reap the consequences of that decision, he stated. Here's how the article concludes with another quote from this conservative legal scholar. He says, but for decades, Republican presidents played along. Is that not the truth? Republican presidents played along. The left had normalized their preferences as good global citizenship. Trump's actions put an end to all of that. So all of these organizations and all of these treaties and all of these crises that the UN and related organizations is promising to solve, according to this legal scholar, is just soft law. It's soft international law mirroring progressive liberal values, contrary to Israel, contrary to Western values, contrary to American values, and the globalists just can't wait to see America get absorbed and sucked into all of that in preparation for their new world order. Republican presidents and Democrat presidents have all just played right along, and here's Donald Trump coming along and saying no. and pulling us out of these things. This is an amazing development. Now, I'll talk in a minute about how this globalist group framework is reacting against what Trump is doing. And I think the reaction is preparatory for global government more than anything else. But before we get to that, what else is Trump doing? Well, notice this article here from Breitbart. This one dated January the 4th, 2026. It says Iran, there it is, Rubio, that's our Secretary of State under Trump, has said there's not a war in Venezuela. Maduro's capture was a law enforcement function. Now, I'm recording this in the wake of the invasion, if we can call it that. Police action might be a better term, law enforcement function, where Trump went into Venezuela and very skillfully, and a lot of things had to go right for this to work out the way it did, went in skillfully, captured Maduro, brought him, I believe, to New York City to face charges for his crimes, and said, you know what, we're going to run Venezuela for a while until things settle down there. And the world community cannot believe Trump did this. This is outrageous, they say. And what Rubio is saying is it's not outrageous. This is a legitimate law enforcement function of the President of the United States. So let's watch what Rubio said here. Let's listen to what Rubio said here. And again, I'm sort of prepping you for how the world is reacting against these recent nationalistic endeavors by Donald Trump. The article says Sunday on NBC's Meet the Press, Secretary of State Marco Rubio said the U.S. arrest of Venezuela's Maduro was a law enforcement function. Rubio said, there's not a war. I mean, we're not at war against drug trafficking organizations and not a war against Venezuela. Rather, we're enforcing American laws with regards to oil sanctions. We have sanction entities. We go to court, we get a warrant, and seize those boats with oil that will continue. And we will continue to reserve the right to take strikes against the drug boats that are bringing drugs towards the United States, that are being operated by transnational criminal organizations, including the cartel. Of course, the leader of that cartel is now in U.S. custody and facing U.S. justice in the Southern District of New York, and that's Nicolas Maduro. We made big progress in that regard, and then Rubio added, this was at essence, at its core, a law enforcement function. So what a lot of people are trying to argue is the United States of America had no business doing what we did recently with Maduro, how what we did with Maduro is not, at all in our national interest to do so. I, of course, would beg to differ. And here's some of the reasons that I would beg to differ. There's something called the Monroe Doctrine. And I notice a lot of people are now calling this, based on what Trump did, the Monroe Doctrine, meaning that what happens in our hemisphere is our business. And that is a policy that goes back in time to one of our presidents, Monroe, who espoused that, advocated for it, and governed accordingly. The other thing that's interesting is we did this before with Panama's Noriega, and that was the first Bush administration that did this kind of thing. And as I said before, that was more of a globalist, liberal administration, but even at that time and under him, we recognized that as a legitimate law enforcement function. And even beyond that, as the article brings out, these boats from Venezuela were bringing drugs into our country. Now, if that's happening and we can put a stop to it, then that is a legitimate law enforcement function. And as I had an opportunity to mention on the prior pastor's point of view, that would be, let's see, number 391, was it? That was released January the 16th, 2026. We talked in that pastor's point of view how there was actually a presence of Iran in Venezuela, putting drones and things of that nature into Venezuela. It's called the Caracas-Tehran access or relationship. And so if we didn't act there, then we would be ignoring the presence of a Middle Eastern enemy in our own hemisphere and very near to our country. So that's another reason why I think Rubio is saying what Trump did is a legitimate law enforcement function. And then there's the issue of oil. You know, that oil there was ours, and it was taken from us. And Trump said, you know what, we're taking it back. So you put all of these things together, and that's why Rubio is saying that what Trump did was an actual legitimate law enforcement function. I mean, this is how we expect presidents to conduct themselves as presidents of the United States of America. So you see what Trump is doing here. He's acting in a nationalistic manner. He's rightfully capturing Maduro. He, beyond that, is not just rightfully capturing Maduro, but he's pulling us out of all of these sort of globalist international UN organizations. And watch now the New World Order react against him. Because I think as the New World Order is reacting against him, you're seeing the stage being set for the global government of the future that the Bible anticipates is going to come at the end of the age. Notice the reaction. Here's another article from Breitbart. This one dated January the 3rd, 2026, and it says Iran. And remember, based on what we said on our prior pastor's point of view, Iran actually had a presence in Venezuela. Iran denounces the U.S. act of aggression against Venezuela and demands what? UN intervention for peace and security. So obviously Iran is not going to like what Trump just did because Iran has a presence in Venezuela. The alliance between Venezuela and Iran, as we showed in the prior pastor's point of view, is a lot more than ideological. There's an actual military type arrangement between the two. And so obviously Iran doesn't like what Trump just did. And they want, look at this, the UN to get in here and slap the hands of Donald Trump and get this issue resolved. Here's what the article says. It says, the Iranian regime, reeling from mass protests that could be the most severe threat to the tyranny of the Ayatollahs since the 1979 Islamic Revolution, denounced Donald Trump's arrest of narco-terrorist dictator Maduro in the harshest terms and demanded that the United Nations intervene on Maduro's behalf. We've got to get global government in place to prevent Donald Trump from acting in a nationalistic manner, is what Iran is saying. Iran said the attack constitutes a clear violation of fundamental principles of the UN Charter and the basic rules of international law, particularly Article 2, Subcategory 4 of the Charter, which prohibits the threat or use of force and fully qualifies as an act of aggression. It must be explicitly and immediately condemned by the UN and by all states, that's the globe, that are committed to the rule of law as well as to international peace and security, the Iranian foreign minister demanded. Iran said the U.S. action against Venezuela, an independent state that is a member of the UN, represents a grave breach of regional and international peace and security that could further expose the UN charter-based order to erosion and destruction. Iran called the UN and its member states to take immediate action against the United States. Translation, the globe needs to now gang up against Donald Trump. And you know what? I think they're likely to do that. The animosity towards Trump and his nationalism is growing. And as the world coalesces in this way, I bring this to your attention on a prophecy update because I think within this reaction are the seeds which will ultimately lead to the fulfillment of global government existing on planet Earth just before Jesus comes back, as predicted in Daniel chapter 7 and verse 23. But the world continues to push back. Look at this next article. This one is dated January the 8th, 2026, and it says development surrounding Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum. Notice her one world globalist attitude as she's reacting to what Trump did recently in Venezuela. The article says in the days following the stunning U.S. military operation in Venezuela and the capture of President Nicolas Maduro, by the way, who is a gross human rights violator, the stuff that this guy did to people in Venezuela is unprecedented and off the charts. And he's rightfully being punished for his crimes in New York City. But her target is not Maduro. Her target is Trump, who fixed the situation. That's what she's upset about. This is the globalist mindset because Donald Trump committed a cardinal sin. He went and did this unilaterally without getting the world community involved in it. And he violated global norms. And that's what she is all hot and bothered about. After reading that previous sentence, it goes on and it says President Claudia Sheinbaum's response hardened into one of the most significant critiques of U.S. foreign policy from a Latin American leader in decades. Sheinbaum's astonishment was not merely rhetorical. It was grounded in international law, diplomatic doctrine, and Mexico's constitutional principles, and it immediately reshaped the diplomatic landscape in the Americas. Sheinbaum's government issued a forceful official communique condemning the U.S. operation as a unilateral, they love that word. Things are not supposed to be unilateral in the globalist framework. They're supposed to be multilateral. And if a nation uses its own power to protect its own interests without securing the world's approval first, it's committed a cardinal sin. That's why all of these nations now are reacting against Donald Trump. She calls this a unilateral breach of the United Nations Charter. The statement explicitly referenced Article 2, Sub 4 of the Charter, which prohibits the threat or use of force against territorial integrity or political independence of any state, a fundamental legal obligation binding on all UN member states. This was not incidental phrasing. It was listen to this, legal framework deliberately chosen to elevate the dispute into the realm of global norms rather than bilateral contention. And there's a lot of legalese here in her reaction against Trump. And if you read this legalese very carefully, what you'll see is it's actually a framework for the global government of the future. We're going to set up things, she's saying, in such a way that no future president will ever violate again. And by the way, as we're setting up these things, we're setting up the global government of the future. And so what's interesting is watching the world react against Trump. And if you look at their reaction very carefully, you can see that the framework and the groundwork is being laid for the future concerning global government. Here's another article along those same lines. This is a reaction of the UN chief. This is January 5th, 2026 article. It says the UN chief is, look at this, deeply concerned. What's he concerned about? Is he concerned about Maduro's tyrannical human rights violations? Nope, not concerned about that. Concerned about what Trump did about it. He didn't play by global rules when he dealt with this situation. The UN chief is deeply concerned over possible intensification of instability in Venezuela. Here's what the article says. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres expressed deep concerns over the potential intensification of instability in Venezuela following a U.S. military operation. He emphasized the importance of adhering to international law, particularly the UN Charter, and called for inclusive dialogue. Well, they love dialogue. Dialogue amongst who? All of these globalists, before nationalists like Trump are allowed to do anything. Dialogue among Venezuelan actors to determine the country's future. Guterres stressed the need to respect sovereignty, political independence, and territorial integrity, advocating the use of international law to address the crisis, invoking the bedrock principle prohibiting the use of force against the territory and independence of any state. The UN Secretary General told the Security Council on Monday that there must be full respect for the UN Charter in the face of the United States military intervention in Venezuela and seizure of President Nicolas Maduro. I really like what Rubio said about this. I don't have a screenshot of it. But when confronted by these accusations from globalists, he basically said, I don't care what the UN thinks. This president is going to act in the national interests of the United States of America. Global concerns are secondary. And you have to understand that globalists don't like this. And they're putting into place a framework where this kind of thing can never happen again. And as they're putting this framework into place, it's laying the foundation, I believe, for the one world government of the future. Here are a few more reactions. We mentioned Mom Donnie, did we not, on our prior Pastor's Point of View prophecy update? But notice what Mom Donnie said. And I didn't know the mayor of New York could be such a globalist and a one-worlder, but apparently he is. He says, I was briefed this morning on the U.S. military capture of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and his wife, as well as their planned imprisonment in federal custody here in New York. And notice what he's upset about. It's like these guys are all reading off the same song sheet, if we can put it that way. Unilaterally attacking a sovereign nation is an act of war and a violation of federal and international law. Trump acted unilaterally, not multilaterally, is what he's upset about. He goes on and he says this blatant pursuit of regime change doesn't just affect those abroad, it directly impacts New Yorkers, including tens of thousands of Venezuelans who call this city home. My focus is their safety. We have to have global government to be safe, I guess. My focus is their safety, the safety of every New Yorker, and my administration will continue to monitor the situation and issue the relevant guidance. It's all sort of word salad stuff to get across the point that Donald Trump, how dare you use American power to act in America's interest? You need to volitionally submit that power to global governance. As much as it's painful for me to admit, Trump, who I like a lot as a president because of things like this, is not going to be there forever. He's going to be replaced by a Democrat or a Republican who may not have this same model or this same nationalistic mindset. And we can easily see a scenario like we had under the Biden administration, who acquiesces to global demands and doesn't put America first. Here is Putin condemning Trump's unilateral action in Venezuela concerning Maduro. And he says Russia condemns the USA for its act of armed aggression in Venezuela. And if the comments of Mamdani and Putin were not enough, then we have Qatar chiming in. Notice what they posted recently. It says, Qatar expresses deep concern over developments in Venezuela and calls for dialogue to resolve the disputes. And I just want to read to you the middle paragraph here of what they have posted, what the government of Qatar has posted. They say the Ministry of Foreign Affairs affirms the state of Qatar's position, advocating adherence to, are you ready for it? Drum roll, please. Adherence to the United Nations and the established principles of international law, including obligations under the Charter to resolve international disputes through peaceful means. And so I hope you're seeing a common thread, a tie that binds, so to speak. All of these anti-American type nations and people and groups, etc., are all saying that what Trump did with Maduro in Venezuela is a violation of international law. It's a violation of the United Nations Charter. And we're very upset with Trump pursuing national interests of America first without first genuflecting properly before the world community. So as you watch this develop in reaction to Trump's nationalistic behavior, rightfully as a president, you can start to see developing the whole concept of globalism, a new world order, which will eventually dominate the world in the tribulation period, long after the Trump administration has left power. Notice also, as part of this article from The Independent, this one dated January the 6th, 2026, and it says the only person who could stop Donald Trump now is Pope Leo. So one of the things to understand about the New World Order and the coming globalism is it's a three-legged stool. It has an economic angle, a political angle, and it has a religious angle. And you have to have all three working in harmony with one another. You take one of those three ingredients away, and the three-legged stool is now just a two-legged stool, which can't stand up. And so you'll notice that the Pope, as I've argued many times on this broadcast, is in essence the popes, the papacy, in essence, have been playing the role of the religious arm of the New World Order. They just express the same sentiments and the same thoughts as the New World Order, but in religious, spiritual language. And now you have some verbiage here concerning the Pope as the last person that could possibly stop the nationalist Donald Trump. Just a sentence or two from this article. It says, American Pope Francis Leo has continued the papal warnings about climate change, shown empathy for the poorest in the world, and renewed calls for peace. For Pope Leo, however, the defining moment of his pontificate and of his relationship with his American homeland is likely to be Venezuela. And here's how the article concludes. It says, at the same seminar, former Security Minister MP Tom, I think you pronounce this, Tugendhat, praised the Holy See for speaking out on a global conflict with prophetic clarity. That is what the Pope must do now, even without an army. Pope Leo can be the West's most important ally. So notice there's a reference here to the Pope speaking out with prophetic clarity, adding kind of a religious veneer to climate change, empathy for the poor, minimum income, one world socialism, all of these things that the New World Order wants to bring in. And here this article is leaning on the Pope and saying, here's your chance to speak out against something that is abhorrent to the New World Order, unilateralism, as opposed to multilateralism. Unilateralism being what Trump just did with Maduro. So what we have covered in the first major section of this broadcast is the whole trajectory into globalism. Let me take you to a second area of things that we want to talk about in this particular broadcast, and that has to do with our second bullet point, the Eurocentric New World Order. And when we talk about this, here is a statue that we typically put up. It's something that both Nebuchadnezzar and Daniel saw back in the 6th century BC, Daniel chapter 2. It's kind of a progression of different empires during the times of the Gentiles. And the feet mixed with iron and clay would represent the kingdom of the Antichrist, the 10 toes, some kind of 10-nation, 10-king, 10-region confederacy. We know from Daniel 7, verse 23 that we looked at earlier, it's going to subdue or cover the whole earth. And it's going to reach its zenith, its apex, its peak, if you will, in the tribulation period, only to be overthrown by the personal return of Jesus instantaneously and cataclysmically. And that's the meaning of the stone cut without human hands that strikes the feet of the statue, and then that stone cut without human hands grows and grows and grows till it fills the whole earth, which is God's kingdom, which is really the only New World Order I'm interested in being a part of, quite frankly. What's being built now is the Antichrist's New World Order. And one of the things that we like to point out is the feet are connected to the legs. The feet are legs of iron. Now, when you interpret this vision properly, what you'll see is the legs of iron represent ancient Rome, and then there's a gap of unspecified duration spanning at least 2,000 years, roughly, in between the legs of iron and the feet mixed with iron and clay, the latter being the Antichrist empire. And the church age, kind of an intercalation, if you will, an interruption in God's past and future work concerning the nation of Israel, you put right in between, which is the mystery that Daniel did not see, nor could Nebuchadnezzar see that. We have to wait for the inner Advent age teaching, Matthew 13, and mystery realm doctrine, primarily given through the Apostle Paul, to get information about what's going on between those legs of iron and those feet mixed with iron and clay. But my point in bringing all of this up is the feet are connected to the legs. The legs is ancient Rome. Most likely the eastern and western divisions of ancient Rome, and the feet being connected to the legs indicates that the coming one world system of the Antichrist will grow out of the cultural inheritance of ancient Rome. So if I'm interpreting this correctly, what I think is coming is tyranny will begin in Europe, the cultural inheritance of ancient Rome. And from there, it's going to spread all over the earth, leading to the 10 horns, subduing the entire world that we read about in Daniel 7, verse 23 and verse 24. So if we're right about all of this and tyranny starts in Europe, that makes this particular article from the Western Journal very, very interesting. Here's an article from the Western Journal. This one is dated January 6th, 2026. And this is what it says. France, obviously in Europe, convicts 10 people for insulting Brigitte Macron while Europe loses its grip on reality. And this is earth-shaking, what this article describes in terms of a change in the legal system away from punishing people for behavior into strictly punishing people for what they say. Notice what the article says. It says, this is how dictatorships begin. 10 people were just found guilty in France for cyberbullying the country's first lady, according to France 24. These weren't threats. Listen to this now. No violence, no blackmail. It was speech, ugly, stupid, conspiratorial speech, in this writer's opinion. This is an opinion piece, of course, aimed at a powerful public figure who sits at the very center of the French political class. The article goes on and it says, but free societies don't criminalize speech because it's foolish or offensive. They tolerate it because the alternative, empowering the state to decide what mockery, speculation, or ridicule is allowed, is the first step. Notice that language. First step towards something darker. And that's the uncomfortable question hanging over Europe right now. How did the continent that gave the world the Enlightenment, that stood shoulder to shoulder with the Allies against genuine totalitarianism, arrive at a place where police and courts are deployed to punish online insults? When government starts policing thoughts and jokes in the name of harm, they aren't protecting democracy so much as they are crossing the line toward hollowing it out. A Paris court has now crossed the line, and that should make anyone who values freedom of expression deeply uneasy. On Monday, judges handed down guilty verdicts against 10 individuals, 8 men and 2 women, who are accused of cyberbullying Macron for circulating crude, false, and conspiratorial claims about her gender and sexuality, speech that some may find offensive, yes, but nonviolent and political in nature. And these punishments were not symbolic wrist slaps. Defendants were ordered to undergo mandatory cyberbullying awareness programs. Might we call these re-education camps? While others receive suspended prison sentences of up to 8 months, which is a rather remarkable escalation for online speech offenses involving no threats and no physical harm. The message from the state was unmistakable: say the wrong thing about the wrong person, and the justice system will intervene. Yet by positioning itself as the arbiter of acceptable opinion and tone, the French government has done far more damage than any internet troll could ever by normalizing the idea that political speech, however distasteful or pointless, is no longer protected when it embarrasses those in power. If the threshold for state intervention is whether a powerful public figure can emotionally ignore speech, then free expression becomes entirely contingent upon temperament. Now, I'm reading a lot from this article, more than I mostly do concerning articles, because it's really earth-shaking in terms of the totalitarianism that France and Europe are descending into. Worse still, the article continues, this standard is infinitely expandable. Any politician, spouse, or government-adjacent figure can now claim subjective distress as grounds to silence critics, satirists, or online provocateurs. Once personal discomfort becomes the metric for criminality, speech rights no longer belong to the public. They belong to the most thin-skinned people closest to power. And this isn't some hypothetical slippery slope. Europe has already slid down this slope. We have watched police detain citizens for shouting slogans or threatening violence, not for shouting slogans or threatening violence, but for standing silently in public with the wrong thoughts. And here's something that we've covered on this broadcast. In at least one case, a woman was questioned and arrested for quietly praying outside an abortion center, and she was accused of committing a crime without speaking a word. When the state claims authority to punish what someone might be thinking, the distinction between a free society and a managed obedience isn't slipping, it's already collapsed. Make no mistake, this is totalitarianism. And I emphasize that word totalitarianism because that's what Daniel predicts arising out of Europe. Make no mistake about this. This totalitarianism is totalitarianism in its modern sanitized form. No jackboots, no gulags, just bureaucrats, courts, and euphemisms like harm, safety, dignity are used to justify policing speech, belief, and eventually conscience itself. If Europe's political class cannot tolerate mockery, offense, or even silent dissent without reaching for the handcuffs, then it has forgotten the very freedom it once claimed to defend. Last sentence. And anyone who still cares genuinely about a free society should find that more alarming than a handful of crude internet posts. So this is now the sad state of affairs in France in terms of, I don't even know if I want to call this a soft form of totalitarianism. I mean, it seems like a more aggressive form, but it's kind of sanitized. After all, these people are just internet trolls saying nasty things about Brigitte Macron. But in reality, what's happening is these people are being criminalized, not based on behavior, not based on threats, not based on violence, but based on what they say. So that is now becoming the norm. That is now becoming the rule in Europe. And you know what? Daniel actually predicted that this day would come. A related subject, highly related, and cheer up, folks, it gets worse, comes from the Gatestone Institute. Here is an article dated January the 9th, 2026, and it says this: the Digital Services Act, a mechanism of mass censorship. And this is talking now about something called the Digital Services Act, otherwise known as the DSA, and is describing the legal structure that is now in place in Europe to censor online behavior, particularly comments that are made on social media. It's not a matter of talking about censorship. This is the actual legal structure that now exists and being implemented to silence any kind of dissent all over Europe, and as the article will demonstrate and reveal, all over the world as well. The legal structure is already in place. So this is a pivotal article, much like the article I just read. The article says this: the Digital Services Act, otherwise known as the DSA, adopted by the European Union in 2022 and fully applicable since February of 2025 to very large online platforms, otherwise known as VLOPs, VLOPS, very large online platforms, such as X, Facebook, TikTok, Google, is not officially presented as an instrument of organized censorship. Formerly, it's purported to be a regulatory framework intended to govern digital services in order to protect users from illegal content, systemic risks, and opaque platform practices. Now, they can't just come out and say, we're going to use this for global censorship, because people would be tipped off. So instead, they frame this necessity for this legal structure that I'm going to describe here in terms of protecting us from illegal content, risks, hate, and those kinds of things. However, a growing number of critics, particularly in the United States, including Elon Musk and several Republican members of Congress, describe the DSA as a mechanism of mass censorship. In their view, it imposes heavy bureaucratic oversight on freedom of expression and enables selective repression of dissenting opinions. Exactly what you're going to have in a global tyranny. Certain perspectives are removed so you have no access to them, because the first order of business of any tyrant is to get control of information. And there is a legal structure already in place, as the article explains, to do that. From the outset, it must be emphasized that the DSA applies to all digital intermediaries, platforms, hosting providers, and related services, albeit with obligations that intensify significantly for VLOPs, which are defined as platforms of more than 45 million monthly users in the European Union. So how does this DSA censorship work? Censorship, rebranded as moderation, is not exercised first by the European Union or national governments. So it's not the kind of censorship that's top-down in that sense. Instead, it is delegated to the platforms themselves under strict regulatory supervision from national administrative authorities. These platforms must conduct assessments of systemic risks, such as dissemination of disinformation, and implement proactive measures, including detection algorithms and large teams of human moderators. So you platforms, you VLOPs, you better regulate yourselves, because if you don't regulate yourselves, you're going to get a massive fine. According to critics, this framework effectively forces American platforms to act as speech police on behalf of the EU, under the constant threat of severe sanctions. In doing so, the DSA produces territorial effects that extend beyond Europe. Totalitarianism starting in Europe and spreading to the rest of planet Earth, right on par with what Bible prophecy anticipates. In doing so, let's see, I think I read that line. Beyond Europe, here we go. This point is crucial. Any American, see, this is something happening in Europe that affects Americans. Any American user of X, for instance, can be sanctioned by X for expressing opinions on the platform. In practice, the DSA is thus applied to all Americans. The requirements constitute a clear instance of the normative imperialism that has characterized the EU for the past 20 years. The only conceivable technical alternative would be the creation of separate platforms like an ex-USA and an ex-EU, which would amount to a denial of the very idea of a global network and of the internet itself. I mean, one of the great things about social media and the internet, and even this broadcast that I'm involved in here, is I can take the thoughts that God has illuminated to me, and I can send them all over the world. Anybody in the world can access what I'm saying here. But under this new structure, your ability to do that will be severely hampered. As a result, platforms are structurally compelled to apply the DSA not only to European users, but also to Americans. And listen to this, ultimately to users worldwide. Starts in Europe, censorship spreads to the entire world. Think Daniel chapter 2. Think feet of iron and clay connected to those legs of iron. By the way, those legs of iron, ancient Rome, that was a totalitarian empire there. That's the empire that crucified our Lord, Jesus Christ. They're the ones that reached back to the Assyrians and grabbed the most brutal form of capital punishment that has ever been administered, the crucifixion, and brought it back to life by popularizing it. And as Roman citizens walked through the streets and saw the victims of the hanging there on the cross, those that were supposedly criminals, they would say to themselves, well, I'm never going to become a criminal because I don't want that to happen to me. That's the legs of iron. And the feet growing out of the legs of iron is essentially talking about a continuation of that type of totalitarianism that we see from ancient Rome. The article goes on and it says the European Commission acts as a central supervisor of VLOPs. So they're not doing the censorship directly, they're just kind of overseeing it and supervising it since they have a structure in place that allows self-censorship to transpire. It ensures compliance by launching investigations, demanding access to data, and imposing fines. In December of 2025, for example, it imposed a $120 million pound fine on X for alleged lack of transparency in moderation practices, particularly concerning blue check marks, alleged verifications of authenticity, which were accused of potentially promoting disinformation. Boy, they love that expression, disinformation. Whenever you see the words disinformation, misinformation, just scratch it out and write in the word censorship, because really what it means is we don't like any kind of data or information that people can have access to that would counter the states, in this case, Europe's, in this case, the New World Order's agenda. I mean, can you see how the Antichrist is going to completely take over this kind of system and abuse it? I believe it was the late Dr. Tim LaHaye that analogized the Antichrist coming to someone that just shows up on the scene and turns on the ignition switch to an automobile or a car that's already been manufactured. And this is the kind of information I want to bring to you in prophecy updates, because it shows you that this automobile is already being constructed. And when the Antichrist shows up, he'll just flick on the ignition, turn the key, and the machine, at that point will be running. It goes on and it says, this enforcement model raises serious concerns regarding the separation of powers. The European Commission designs and enacts the DSC and then proceeds to enforce it itself. Boy, what kind of separation of powers is that? The European Commission designs it, enacts it, and then tells the public, don't worry about it, folks. We'll police it for you. That's kind of like, how does the saying go? The fox guarding the hen house, something to that effect. The result is a decentralized enforcement network in which the most restrictive countries, notably Germany and France, both in Europe, I might add, exert disproportionate influence through their radical national laws on hate speech. Tiny states of Europe governing all of Europe and eventually all of the world in terms of censorship based on this structure that's being constructed. This dynamic leads to a downward harmonization of freedom of expression across the entire European Union. Content flagged in one country is effectively flagged for the entire European Union. Finally, any individual may report content through the notice and action mechanism. Trusted flaggers accredited by the DSC's enjoyed privileged status. Their reports are prioritized and frequently result in rapid removals of any content they deem questionable or inaccurate. Recently, the United States went so far as to ban entry into the country for 5 Europeans, including former European Commissioner Thierry, I guess is how you say that, Breton, and several activists for their role in exerting pressure on American online platforms. Now, you might recall that we covered this on a prior Pastor's Point of View broadcast where Marco Rubio said, you know what, if you're a European elite and you're involved in this kind of censorship or have been involved in this kind of censorship, then you cannot enter our country. So if this wasn't serious, I doubt the Trump administration and Marco Rubio would have done anything to prevent these European elites from entering the United States of America. And the fact that the Trump administration, Marco Rubio, etc., are placing these limitations, preventing these European elites from entering the country, shows you that this is not hypothetical, what I'm talking about. This is not fun and games. This is not imagination. This is not what could be. This is what's actually happening in the realm of global censorship. It goes on just a few more sentences. It says, in short, American social media platforms from the first line of censorship. American social platforms form the first line of censorship, but they operate with a clear chain of command emanating from the EU and the European national governments, which impose transparencies, quotas, audits, permanent oversight, etc. The U.S. House Judiciary Committee has denounced this system as one of organized censorship in which the EU effectively arms NGOs, listen to this last phrase, to compel American technology companies to remove content that is lawful in the United States but deemed problematic in Europe. So you might be involved in posting content as an American that's totally lawful in the United States of America, but it's censored because of this structure that I'm talking about here. I apologize. I said that prior sentence was the last sentence, but just a little bit more if you'll indulge me. This environment of stringent enforcement strongly encourages platforms to over-moderate content in order to maximize regulatory risk, leading to the removal of content that is perfectly legal. We are speaking here of approximately 8 million posts deleted per month in the European Union, not including complete bans such as those imposed on Russian media outlets. The criteria underpinning content moderation are neither uniform nor clearly defined. Instead, they rely on existing EU and national laws rendering the system vague and highly suspect to abuse. Terms such as hate are never precisely defined, allowing the expansive and discretionary interpretation. Illegal content is treated as the top priority. So what starts to control what people can read, what people can see, what people can post all over the world is some nebulously defined term in Europe like hate. And you point to the European Union or the European Commission and said, you're censoring. They say, oh, no, we're not. We're just investigating platforms where, something irregular is happening, whatever that means, which causes these platforms to self-censor. Because if they don't self-censor, here comes the European Union with a significant fine, and in some cases, even a criminal offense. In reality, the article says, hate has no coherent legal meaning and serves primarily as a pretext for censoring opinions that deviate from left-wing orthodoxy. A second category, systemic risks applicable to VLOPs. This is the most elastic and dangerous category, encompassing harm to minors through addictive or violent content and what is broadly labeled as disinformation. Examples of disinformation include allegedly false information about elections or public health. Sound familiar, folks? This is like a 2020 nightmare rerun. And algorithmic, if that's a word, manipulation. Such content is not necessarily illegal, but is considered harmful if amplified, leading to measures such as deprioritization of posts about COVID-19 or vaccines deemed false. It must be stressed that disinformation itself is not illegal. The DSA therefore mandates the active censorship of content that is lawful, but merely displeasing to the European princes and their legions of censors. In 2025, 100 free speech experts warned that the DSA would lead to a dislocation of global free speech. Last sentence, American freedom of speech cannot survive a Big Brother DSA. In other words, what they're running in Europe is completely contrary to any sense of freedom of expression, First Amendment freedoms. As Americans believe we receive those freedoms from God, as stated in the Declaration of Independence, and what God giveth, man can't take away. But this structure here is completely antithetical to that, and will move very aggressively in the form of global censorship, as 100 free speech experts testified as this DSA nightmare was coming into existence there in Europe. So censorship of ideas beginning in Europe, spreading to the whole world. That's the kind of scenario that you see spoken of in the totalitarianism that's coming in Daniel 2. We have a fast video we want to play. I want to play this because it reveals how these tech tyrants think. The person that's speaking here is named Shlomo Kramer. He is a cyber security billionaire. And what he says here is so emblematic of the way these tech tyrants think. I mean, once they have control of technology, they just don't have any respect for free speech and First Amendment rights, as Mr. Kramer, Shlomo Kramer's words here are going to reveal. So let's go ahead and play that at this time.
know it's difficult to hear, but it's time to limit the First Amendment in order to protect it. And quickly before it's too late.
What do you mean?
I mean that we need to control the platforms, all the social platforms. We need to stack rank the authenticity of every person that expresses themselves online and take control over what they are saying based on that ranking.
The government.
The government should
control the social media.
What an amazing sentiment this man expresses. You know, we've got to destroy free speech to protect free speech. What kind of logic is that? It's not logic at all. We've got to destroy the First Amendment in order to protect the First Amendment. I mean, if you put your ear to the ground and listen carefully, you could hear Thomas Jefferson, who authored the primary author of the Declaration of Independence, rolling over in his grave. I mean, no tech tyrant has the right to take away freedom of speech, and yet that's what this individual, Shlomo Kramer, whose mindset apparently is emblematic of tech tyrants around the world. This is how he thinks. Now, on the screen there, I want to show you this real quick. I found this actually on Elon Musk's X feed, and it's entitled "Countries with the Most Arrests for What? Drug Trafficking? No. Murder? No. Child pornography? No. Child abduction? No. Countries with the most arrests for online comments." And look at who's out in front. The United Kingdom, coming from Europe. 12,183 plus arrests. And in third place is Germany, coming out of Europe, 3,500 arrests. And those come before China at only 1,500 arrests for online behavior. Muslim countries like Turkey, only 500 arrests. Russia, communist country, only 400 arrests. In front of Syria, 146 arrests. In front of Iran, only 100 arrests. And so look at what the UK is doing in this realm of free speech, in the very place of the world where parliamentarian democracy arose from, in the very part of the world that gave us the Magna Carta, which was a massive step forward in terms of personal and legal freedoms. You see this happening, these online arrests happening in Europe, starting in Europe and eventually, I believe, spreading out through the entire world. And so that's why this European New World Order I bring to your attention in a prophecy update. Let's move, if we could, to our last area. This we're going to cover real fast because we've dealt with this many times before. Our third bullet point is Babylon. We know that Babylon is destined to rise to power. Revelation 17, verse 18 describes a great harlot whose name is Babylon the Great. And it says, "The woman you saw is the great city which reigns over the kings of the earth," a city named Babylon. Bullinger, in his commentary on the book of Revelation, says concerning Revelation 17, verse 18, if we could adjust the slide there, God says it's a city. He does not say a system or a religion, but a city. So it actually is a religious system, but first and foremost, the Holy Spirit wants us to understand, based on Revelation 17, verse 18, that this system of the Antichrist comes out of a city, and the city has a name, Babylon the Great. Babylon is mentioned 5 times in the book of Revelation. It means Babylon. Babylon is mentioned about 300 times in the Bible as a whole, and it always means the literal city of Babylon. On the banks of the Euphrates River, between the Euphrates and the Tigris, we actually have a map there where you can see where that place is, 58 miles south of Baghdad, an area called Mesopotamia, which means in Greek between the rivers. The Hebrews called that area Shinar. It's where the Tower of Babel once stood. Genesis 11, I think it's verse 2. It's where the children of Israel were taken into Babylonian captivity for 70 years. You'll find that reference in Daniel chapter 1 and verse 2. And it is what we would call modern-day Iraq, containing the literal city of Babylon. And that city is destined to be restored and enjoy global dominance in the last days. And there are a lot of people out there, I get emails from them constantly, or texts or YouTube comments and whatnot, telling me that Babylon doesn't mean literal Babylon in Revelation 17 and 18. I'm of the view that it does. I have a whole book on this. There's a screenshot of the book. It's called Babylon, the Bookends of Prophetic History. It lays out the case biblically for literal Babylon in Bible prophecy and tries to answer all of the allegorical objections to the literal view. So if you're hung up on this issue and you're trying to allegorize Revelation 17 and 18 and turn it into the United States or Rome or Jerusalem or just some kind of one world religion independent of the literal city of Babylon, I would recommend that book to you. And what's interesting is, ever since I began teaching this, I've always hit two objections. People say, oh, come on, Babylon can't be restored like the Bible anticipates in Revelation 17 and 18 because it's just a vacation resort. It's a tourist trap. It's a city of no economic prominence. And the other argument is, you know what, it's a landlocked city. It's not a maritime city on the sea, the way Bible prophecy anticipates, because those that weep and wail the loudest when Babylon falls in the seventh bowl judgment, those that weep and wail the loudest are the merchants of the sea, Revelation 18 says. And you can't tell me that has any significance relative to a landlocked city. Now those two arguments that I just gave are all changing. We're going to reach a point where those arguments can't be used anymore because of this map here describing the Al-Faw project, which involves, as you can see, a dry canal and an international road connecting the Persian Gulf to Turkey. And think of the money that could be saved in transportation by businesses if they were able to take their goods through the interior that way and not around the coast as is typically done, or not through another canal. Suddenly all these commerce and goods and trade are passing through that area. There's Baghdad, 58 miles south of it is Babylon, and Babylon, just like that, becomes wealthy, just like the Bible says. And Babylon, lickety-split, becomes what we would call a maritime city of some sort, just like Revelation 18 anticipates. So with that being said, I've got two fast articles here related to the development of this Al-Faw Grand Port system. I reported on this in December of 2025, but these articles keep coming. And so here is an article. This one is dated January the 5th, 2026. And as long as these things keep showing up in the international news, I'm going to continue to bring them to your attention. It says Director General of Ports, Al-Faw Grand Port approaches full commercial operation in 2026. It says here that the Director General of the General Company for Ports of Iraq announced on Monday, January 5th, 2026, that the Al-Faw Grand Port has entered an advanced stage in preparation for the commencement of the full commercial operations in 2026. During a press conference, the Director General stated that the company has completed the preparation of the navigation channel and the main berths of the port, and has received the first vessels as part of trial shipping lanes. He then added that work is going to further develop the infrastructure and strengthen, listen to this, maritime and land connectivity with regional international ports. The director emphasized that the Al-Faw port today represents a strategic pillar within Iraq's vision to become a major logistical hub between the Gulf and Europe, noting that continuous coordination is underway with government agencies and international organizations to guarantee the success of full operational activities during the coming year. One other fast article on this one dated also January the 5th, 2026, if we can adjust the slide there. It says this: the Director General of the General Company for Ports of Iraq announced Monday, January 5th, 2026, that the GCPI immersed tunnel project within the Al-Faw Grand Port has made significant progress. He noted that vehicles are expected to pass through the tunnel by late February, with the projected schedule for full completion before mid-year. Wow, that's coming up fast. The project is part of efforts to connect the two sides of Al-Faw and the Qasir ports, representing a strategic step to strengthen land connectivity with the port and enhance the efficiency of cargo and resource movement. The achievement of this project reflects the company's commitment to developing Iraq's port infrastructure, ensuring its readiness to support regional and international trade flows. So Babylon, along with these other signs, is something else to pay attention to as we explore the end times scenario. Well, here's our review slide. In this particular session, we covered three major things: globalism, developing, particularly as it's reacting to Trumpism. Trumpism, in a certain sense, is solidifying globalism. And we also took a look at the things that are happening in Europe related to censorship. This is all part of the prophetic scenario, albeit Daniel 2. And then we had a few words to say about Babylon, which is highly significant, Revelation 17 and 18. We like to conclude our broadcast with a note of good news. Titus 2, verse 13, a verse you know well if you follow us, says, looking for the blessed hope and the appearing of the glory of our God and great Savior, Jesus Christ. The glory of our great God and Savior, Jesus Christ. Our hope is not in Christianity subduing culture and this world getting better and better and better, and the church establishing the 7 mountains of influence, as many post-millennial types teach today. That's not where our hope is. If that's where you're basing hope, then you've got a false hope, because the Bible never teaches such a thing will happen. Rather, what the Bible teaches is, as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be at the coming of the Son of Man. It teaches that evil men and imposters will wax worse and worse, deceiving and being deceived. So we need to put our hope in the right place. Our hope is Jesus. And Jesus made us a promise that any moment he's going to return in an event called the pre-tribulational rapture of the church and take us to heaven before judgment falls on this God-hating, God-rejecting, Christ-rejecting world. And you can be tied into that promise by taking Jesus as your Savior, and you can take him as your Savior by placing your faith, which is another way of saying trust, reliance or dependence into the finished work of Jesus Christ that he accomplished for you, for all of us on the cross 2,000 years ago. And if you'll trust in him, one step, you're a Christian. You're God's child. You're tied into his promises. You're an heir of salvation. And one of the things he promises you is participation in the rapture. And so I would encourage you to get that settled by placing your personal faith or trust in Jesus Christ. A few infomercials by way of closing. You can follow Andy Wood's ministries, particularly Pastor's Point of View, in podcast form. We encourage you to go to the App Store, type in Andy Wood's Ministries into the search engine, and download our free app and catch all of our content that way. We encourage you to visit our website, andywoodsministries.org, get all of our content that way, including Pastor's Point of View. And there's a very conspicuous way on the homepage to sign up for our show notes. And so these notes that I read from, every time we post a Pastor's Point of View show, will show up in your inbox, all for free. As the Bible says, freely you have received, freely give. A lot of ministries will charge you for access to resources like this. That's not our policy or our philosophy. We say the gospel is free, and we want to make all of our content available for free. Also, something else that's free, in addition to everything else we're talking about, is the Ask Andy AI search engine. Just go to our app or go to our website, and you'll see an opportunity there to link to the Ask Andy AI search device. Type in your Bible question, whatever it is, theological question, into the question box, hit send. It'll think for a minute or two. Well, not even a minute or two. How about a second or two? And it will go through all my sermons in the database, and it will bring up to you a paragraph in very readable form that will answer your Bible question. And it will take you to the exact spot in the sermon or sermons where I dealt with that issue. And it'll give you potential follow-up questions to ask. If you're interested in seminary training, I recommend the seminary that I'm the president of, Chafer Theological Seminary. Go to chafer.edu to learn more. This time of the year, we're just embarking on the spring semester. There's our course offerings for the spring. This is a great time to sign up for a class or two, or perhaps more, as you work towards a certificate or perhaps an academic degree. And while you're there at chafer.edu, download a free copy of our academic journal. The latest is hot off the press, dealing with key academic articles defending the belief system that we embrace at Chafer Theological Seminary. And here is our big event right around the corner, less than a month away. ProfCon, our 5th annual prophecy conference. We're hosting it this year at the Marriott City Walk, Sugarland Town Square, so as to accommodate more people. There's a QR code. There is a website where you can go and register for that conference. We are filling up fast, and you want your spot to be solidified for you. We would love for you to come and participate in this conference. We would love for you to come to Sugarland and be involved in this conference, and look at this lineup of speakers as we, in this 5th annual prophecy conference, deal with last days discernment. Paul Wilkinson, Russ Miller, Olivier Melnick, Patrick Wood, Alex Newman, myself. I'm going to be doing a special interview with Melissa Hooray of the Lindell Recovery Network. And throughout the event is going to be special music by Olam Worship. You're going to love this prophecy conference, and we're inviting you to come. It runs all day Friday, culminating in a banquet, a Shabbat meal Friday evening. It runs all day Saturday, culminating in a Q&A Saturday later afternoon. And then we invite you to stick around and come over to church at Sugarland Bible Church nearby, February 22nd, where our conference presenters will be presenting during our normal Sunday school and church service times at Sugarland Bible Church. Love for you to come. Not long after that is the Chafer Theological Seminary Pastors Conference. You can see there our keynote speaker, Pastor Dennis Roxer, dealing with the very important subject of spiritual warfare and all of the other sort of sub-presenters, Dennis Roxer being the keynote. But many different presentations will be given throughout the conference, and that is going to be... Let's see here, March 2nd through the 4th, 2026. And right after that is a great conference in the Pacific Northwest, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, the Stealing the Mind Conference, a one-day, all-day, Saturday conference, March the 4th, 2026. I'm one of the presenters, along with others, dealing with key prophetic and worldview issues. If you're looking for a conference on the East Coast, I would recommend the August 1st, 2026 Abraham to Armageddon Prophecy Conference put on by comingsoonministries.org. You can see the various speakers that will be involved in that conference. And don't forget about our Compass Bible Lands cruise. And this goes from September the 24th, all the way to October 11th, 2026. And look at where it goes. 5-star ship, 9-day cruise, 3 countries, 5 days in Israel. As you see from the map, it's going to go to the various places that Paul went on his missionary journeys in the book of Acts. And I will be teaching, obviously, live on the ship in Israel and at these various locations, along with host Bill Perkins. And so these trips are unforgettable. And they are literally trips of a lifetime, as the brochure there says. And there's no better way to learn the Bible than to go to the actual places with proper instructors helping you understand what happened biblically on those exact locations. My book, The Bible and Your Vote, has been out for a little while. We want to get that into your hands. There's, if we could switch the slide, there's a QR code where you can access that. You can also find it on Amazon. And we just wanted to express our appreciation for you all as we move into the new year. We appreciate your willingness to study the end of the age signs along with us. We're going to keep doing this throughout the year, unless, of course, the Lord raptures us home, which would be great news, would it not? But until that happens, we're going to be here behind this microphone talking about the signs pointing to the end of the age. And we just wanted to express our appreciation to you as an audience for your loyalty. You people are some of the most fiercely loyal people probably on planet Earth. And you're certainly some of the most generous. And you're certainly some of the most prayerful. And you're certainly some of the most encouraging as you constantly send us emails, texts, comments on social media, comments on YouTube, always encouraging us. And so as we move into this new year, we wanted to express our appreciation for you. Well, that's it for today's Pastor's Point of View. Lord willing, we'll be back next week as we bring to you another edition of Pastor's Point of View. God bless you. Thank you for listening, and thank you for watching.